Howard Kurtz here with Grover Norquist here at the Offices of Americans for Tax Reform. You have been everywhere in the last few days. You've been on every television network, many more than once. You were at a political breakfast. You wrote a piece for The Hill. How did this whole debate about raising taxes become about Grover Norquist?
Well, it happened once a couple years ago when we were doing the debt ceiling fight. Because Harry Reid doesn't want to talk about the fact that he's spending too much money and wants to raise taxes. So he says all the Republicans want to raise tax, want to do the right thing. That means raise taxes, except Grover won't let them. Me, we share the pledge with all candidates. Most Republicans, 90+% of Republicans, make that commitment in writing to their constituents. My job is that I share the same wording with everybody so that somebody in Nevada or Maine or Florida knows that if a congressman or senator has taken the pledge, they know exactly what he or she committed to.
But what is your strategy in the middle of this battle, and
Sure.
it is a battle with the fiscal cliff coming, in being so visible and going on so many television programs to carry the anti-tax banner?
Well, first of all, I would like to talk about taxes on TV and radio all day. That's why I like April 15th, which is very helpful. I like Cost of Government Day. We're trying to make a holiday out of Lady Godiva's ride to pick another day where we can talk about taxes. But the D's have decided that in a discussion about a fiscal cliff or a grand bargain to reform entitlements and do something with revenues, all they want to talk about is taxes. So nobody's inviting the Medicare reform people or the Medicaid reform people on TV because the D's aren't actually, I think, in favor of any of those reforms. They just want to talk about tax increases. And so we're having a conversation about should we raise taxes? My argument is we have a spending problem. Let's spend less. Raising taxes is what politicians do instead of reforming government.
But, you know, you're asked in every interview, of course, that some high-profile Republicans now seem to be edging away from the pledge. Obviously, President Obama won re-election by saying we should raise taxes on the wealthiest Americans, but not on middle-class Americans. So how is it that you are getting more attention than many elected lawmakers in making this argument about holding the line on tax increases?
Well, again, the same 6 people that they interviewed 2 years ago saying we might raise taxes are the same 6 people who are out there today saying we might raise taxes. They didn't raise taxes.
Lindsey Graham, Saxby Chambliss, people like that?
Peter King. They're bringing out, I mean, this is turning in last year's homework again. Okay? And they go, oh my goodness, look at these 6 guys. These are the same people you were asking me about 2 years ago.
I think one of the reasons that the bookers seek you out is that you're colorful. For example, when asked about Congressman Peter King saying, you know, I think signing the tax pledge should only last for 1 term of Congress, you got pretty personal. You said, well, I hope his wife understands that these commitments last more than 2 years.
Well,
why take that kind of shot?
Well, because 2 things. One, he was asked on TV to talk about Benghazi. So he wasn't thinking through what he was going to say if somebody asked him on taxes. And perhaps I should have cut him some slack on that because he said something stupid. He knows perfectly well that the pledge is for as long as you're in Congress, as does Chambliss. He said, I'm with Chambliss. Chambliss not only had the pledge as a 4x5 blow up in his campaign, he would go and re-sign it every time it faded over time. One of his campaign workers just blogged about that today. So the pledge, everybody knows, is something that lasts just as long as you're in Congress. You promise, I'm going to Congress, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to the Senate, here's what I'll do. For him to suggest there's an expiration date, it was irritating because he knows that's not true. I consider that a real cheap shot at other people's commitments. And no, you don't tell the bank, why are you sending me those letters? I signed that mortgage 20 years ago.
Are some Republicans afraid of Grover Norquist and Americans for Tax Reform in the sense that if they do back away, if they do violate the pledge, if they do cave to what you would see as pressure from the other side, that they might face a conservative opponent in the next primary?
Well, but it's not a fear of me. I mean, George Herbert Walker Bush didn't lose his presidency because I was unhappy with him. He disappointed not me, he disappointed the American people when he broke his word and raised taxes and didn't get any spending cuts for the tax increase and threw the country into a recession by raising taxes. Then all of a sudden the guy with the big ears became a possibility and Bush collapsed.
Well, you keep playing down your role, but you're the guy who all the television cameras are coming after, so you must have a lot of influence in Washington, correct?
Well, I think in the sense that I articulate and, you know, Ralph Nader's Mr. Consumer, okay? So people, when this consumer issue come up, they talk to Ralph Nader, not necessarily a particular congressman who might. I mean, the guys who are going to do tax reform, when the Republicans have the House and Senate, the presidency, and can write tax reform, will be people like Ryan. or the head of the Ways and Means Committee. They'll write the tax bill. But while we're talking about taxes generically, I'll do.
You're an adequate substitute, I take it. A top House Republican, Tom Cole, says the Republicans should do what the Democrats want because the deadline is coming up, extend the Bush tax cut for 98% of Americans, and then fight about the top 2%. That does extend a lot of tax cuts. You have a problem with that?
I've challenged with it mostly because when he says that, it's a whole day's press that's not about entitlement reform. It's not about reining in spending. It's not about the argument for maintaining all of the tax cuts. So I think,
well, you're deflecting the question here very cleverly.
No. But I have the same problem in my argument with Saxby Chambliss or the South Carolina.
You want a global solution that looks at spending, but there's only a few weeks left before those taxes automatically rise.
And every day when people sit around and shout about how we might raise taxes is a day when the president's not under any pressure to put up or shut up on. I mean, the budget he talks about...
On entitlement reform, you were going to say.
Or any kind of, entitlement reform, any kind of spending. His budget, the spending, there are no spending cuts in his budget. He claims credit for not occupying Iraq for 20 years. They kicked him out, okay? He got $800 billion in savings because he's not occupying Iraq. Well, Bush wasn't planning on occupying Iraq. He was not occupying Iraq. Well, why don't we not occupy Iraq for 200 years and save even more?
You want more of a focus on the spending side, clearly.
Yeah. And so what Cole did, I think, it's an interesting tactic. If your goal is how do you save all the tax increases, it's not impossible to say do this and then this. My counter argument, or different argument, not necessarily in conflict with his, is that the Republicans should do two things. And that is, first, they should insist that C-SPAN cameras be in the negotiating room. Why? Because then and only then will the American people see the Republicans putting real ideas on the table and Obama not, or Obama will put things on the table. Second, and it has the added advantage that Obama said when he ran for president he would govern this way. Two, whatever's agreed to should stay online, written down in legislative language for 7 days. So not just the lobbyists in D.C. find out about it, not just pharma and the insurance companies will know it's in Obamacare, but the American people will know it's in a bill. If you do those two things, then I believe the negotiations you'll get will give you something that I and the American taxpayers are happy with.
You're on record against smoke-filled rooms. Given all these interviews you're doing...
They can smoke in the room. I don't mind that. It just has to have a C-SPAN camera there.
Given all these interviews you're doing, what time are you getting up in the morning?
4 o'clock today in order to read all the emails I didn't get to yesterday and to write a couple of articles.
All right, Grover Norquist, thanks very much for sitting down with us here in Washington.